It's Andrew Marsh here. I'm Director of Solutions Engineering at Archon. Today I want to spend some time talking about something many enterprises are quietly grappling with, even if it's not always openly discussed. So that is what to do when your Informatica ILM archive is still holding lots of valuable data, but the system around it is no longer fitting your organization and how your organization currently operates. This is not a conversation about whether ILM is good or bad. In fact, it's quite the opposite. ILM really played an important role for a long time. For many organizations, it was the right tool at the right time. It solved a growing problem at the right moment, which was archiving JD Edwards, PeopleSoft, SAP, and other legacy ERP systems. But the data, the technology, and the business expectations have changed. And that change is really forcing enterprises to rethink what an archive is supposed to do. Let's talk a little bit about why ILM was originally adopted, then we'll jump into some more details. So ILM was first adopted. Most enterprises were dealing with that rapid data growth problem I just mentioned. Large transactional systems like ERP environments, they were starting to slow down. Operational databases, they were filling up with historical records that were rarely, if ever, accessed. Systems didn't have a way to delete those legacy records. They still had regulatory expectations, and they were slowly getting more and more strict over time. And so really that ILM solved that problem. It provided a defensible way to retain data without keeping it all online in the live application. It introduced structure really where before that it was just chaos and struggle. It automated the movement of data out of those active production environments into the archive, enforced retention rules in a consistent and auditable way. And obviously ILM, or Informatica in general, has lots and lots of history with that ETL component. So they kind of checked a lot of boxes there. And for many years, it worked really well. Systems were performing better, audits became manageable, compliance teams gained confidence that their data was being handled correctly. And at that point in time, archive data was not really expected to do much else. It's safely and compliantly archive your data for that break glass event in the event you need to satisfy a compliance request. It was just a place you might need to store something for access someday, but not something you actively worked with every day. Now, obviously, today that expectation has changed, right? Over the last decade, and certainly over the last 5 years, the way enterprises think about that legacy data has evolved. It's no longer viewed as that record of the past. It's now seen as an asset, right? It can inform decisions for the future. It can reveal patterns and support advanced analytics. At the same time, enterprise technology landscapes have changed, right? There wasn't the legacy content management system, the legacy data, and these surrounding systems. Organizations now operate in these hybrid environments with data spread across on-premises systems, hybrid systems, cloud platforms, SaaS applications, and all those combinations, right? On top of that, regulations have become more detailed, more demanding, especially around access, traceability, proof of compliance, and ability to access that data quickly and efficiently. And you also have to prove that you have a policy, that you're satisfying your policy, and you're disposing of that content at the end of its useful life cycle. So now we start to see where ILM starts feeling a little bit out of place, right? Perhaps most importantly, the business users have changed their expectations, right? They're not looking for that valuable information locked away behind legacy interfaces or difficult retrievals. They're looking for that data to be accessible, searchable, and usable, even if it's not part of the live application. ILM was never really designed for this level of flexibility. It was designed for archiving and compliance purposes. And again, that break glass event where, oh my God, I need that data. Let's go and find it. And the other thing it was really good at was data access. And now organizations sort of like to commingle data, structured content and unstructured content. And ILM was never particularly good at that unstructured content side, right? So this is really often the turning point. Enterprises are realizing that the archive is not the problem. The limitation lies on how tightly the data is bound to that legacy platform. So this leads to the most common question that we get here at Archon. Can Informatica ILM be modernized, or does it need to be replaced entirely? The answer is that it can be modernized, but not through a simple lift and shift or basic migration. Modernization is a strategic process. It requires preserving everything that made ILM successful while removing the constraints that prevent archive data from being used more effectively today. Let's break that down a little bit. So, step one, first step is always understanding what exists. Organizations need clarity on what data is in the archive. Believe it or not, frequently there's data, legacy data in ILM archives that people haven't touched in years. So we want to know what records are still under retention and why, which data sets still carry business value. That assessment phase is critical because it defines the scope and the risk profile of that modernization effort. Step two, the next step is decoupling. This is where archive data is separated from the ILM application itself, allowing it to exist independently of the legacy system. Once that data is decoupled, organizations are no longer forced to maintain the original platform simply to access those historical records. Step three, from there, migration and governance come into play. Archive data is moved into a modern, open environment that can scale, integrate, and evolve. At the same time, retention rules, legal holds, audit trails, access controls, they need to remain fully enforced. Step four, finally, integration becomes possible. Archive data can be connected to analytics tools, reporting platforms, or even AI initiatives, which every single prospect asks us how we connect that data to those systems. So what was once static storage for compliance purposes becomes an active part of the enterprise information landscape. This is not about starting over or discarding years of compliant archiving work. It's about really unlocking the next phase of that value. One of the reasons organizations delay this conversation is because ILM still appears to be doing its job, right? Audit trails, pass. Data retention, confirmed. Systems are stable, check. Still a great platform if that's all your requirements are. But the cost of staying static is often underestimated. Any of you have watched my videos about technical debt? That's the perfect scenario, right? It's just that it's the pebble in the shoe that keeps growing and keeps growing till you can't walk. So the cost of staying static, that, as I said, is underestimated, right? Those legacy environments are expensive to maintain and ever increasingly more expensive to maintain. They rely on specialized expertise that's becoming harder to find, and they frequently depend on aging infrastructure that adds operational risk. Beyond cost, there's a more subtle issue, opportunity. We talked about that briefly. When archive data remains locked inside that legacy system, it cannot easily contribute to your analytics, forecasting, or modernization initiatives. Over time, the archive becomes a silent source of technical debt. What began as a compliance solution slowly turns into a constraint, slowly becomes that anchor that's preventing you from moving and accelerating your business forward. So now let's transition. What should a modern archive look like in practice? Searchable without requiring legacy application knowledge. It allows authorized users to find information quickly and confidently. It supports reporting and analysis without complex extraction processes. Built on a modern platform so you can scale it indefinitely, commingle structured and unstructured data, address your retention policies, manage your audit trails, and your compliance is fully defensible and satisfies modern compliance requirements. So the difference is that the archive now is no longer passive. It becomes a living information layer that continues to support the business, not just regulatory obligations. So in many ways, the story of Informatica ILM is an evolution story. It was built for its time, and it served enterprises well. But the world has changed. Today's organizations need archives that do more than just store historical data. They need archives that support insight, agility, and growth. So modernization really is about carrying forward that strength of that ILM, but also adapting to those modern expectations, moving from strategic storage to strategic value, not just preserving the data, but putting the data back to work. So let's close out with this. I've been talking for a good bit here. If you watched this far, chances are you're already thinking about how your own ILM environment works, what data it holds that it shouldn't necessarily hold, what it costs to maintain that data, and what value might still be locked inside. If you want to explore what modernization could look like for your organization, call us. We're happy to help. Click the link in the description, get in touch with us, and let's have a conversation. As they say online, smash that like button. Thanks for watching, folks. We'll see you next time.